After rebirth, the first thing I did was to go to the hospital to abort the baby in my belly, and then I asked Jason for a divorce. I didn't ask for custody of my son Ethan, nor did I ask for other property. I just asked for a seaview house in a small coastal town. The small 3-bedroom and 1 living room was decorated very warmly by me, and all the appliances I bought were parent-child sets. Ethan thought all this was prepared for him at first and was dismissive of it. It wasn't until he found that the pink children's room was full of dolls and the closet was full of beautiful princess dresses that he felt panic. He and Jason both thought I was sick and crazy. He cried and asked me, "Mom, I am your biological son, why don't you even look at me, but treat your imaginary daughter so well?" He didn't know that it was not imaginary. I really had a beautiful and well-behaved daughter. She lived in my memory of my previous life. Chapter 1. Half a year after settling in the seaside town, I received a call from Jason, asking me why. Our divorce process was very plain, as simple as having a meal together. We both agreed that Ethan would stay in the Gu family, and did not argue about the issue of custody. He did not ask me why I suddenly wanted to divorce, and completed the procedures with an indifferent look. I thought he did not care, just like he never cared about the joys and sorrows of my wife after so many years of marriage. Now, after half a year, he suddenly asked me why? At that time, I was hanging a portrait in the newly painted pink children's room, a woman holding a little girl sitting on the bay window. Outside the window was the blue sea and windmills, and the golden sunlight fell on the little girl's face, covering up her sickly paleness. I stared at the little girl's face in the painting. Why? I want to say, because we would have a daughter, her name is Sophie. She is very beautiful and well-behaved, but unfortunately she is not healthy. 70% of congenital heart disease can be found during pregnancy examinations, but she is the unlucky 30%. You had a brief fatherly love for her, but soon you lost patience with her frequent hospitalizations and surgeries. You would start staying out all night, citing the bad atmosphere at home as an excuse. When I was exhausted from taking care of her, when I was waiting outside the ICU praying that the god of death would not take her away, when I signed the consent form for giving up treatment alone and watched the doctor pull out her oxygen tube, you would have an affair with your mistress outside, and brought Ethan with you openly, letting him happily call another woman Mom. But I didn't say anything in the end. I just asked Jason, "Did you have breakfast with Miss Zhou today?" Chapter 2. A year after I settled in the seaside town, I met Ethan. At that time, I had just returned from a trip to Xinjiang. I was walking home with a canvas bag on my back, and I saw the 2 figures, one big and one small, standing in front of the corridor. I subconsciously stopped and kept my distance from them. As time went by, I rarely thought of this father and son. They didn't like me, and my feelings for them were also worn out by the long disappointment in my previous life. I thought that as long as I didn't look for them deliberately in this life, we would never meet again. It was Ethan who spoke first. Although he was only 6 years old, he was precocious and spoke in a baby voice that hurt people. The school organized everyone to come here for a parent-child trip. Grandpa and Grandma said that since I am here, I should come to see you. This is the courtesy and demeanor that Gu family members should have. I nodded silently. Yeah, he and Jason are really alike, not only with exquisite and superior eyebrows, but also with the same cold eyes when looking at me. In my previous life, when I collapsed at Sophie's funeral, and when I climbed to the rooftop on the 36th floor, they looked at me with the same cold eyes. Jason said, "Elena, stop fooling around." He also said, "Mom, stop fooling around." In fact, Ethan contacted me just 1 month after the divorce. He didn't know from whom I heard that I moved to the seaside town, so he called me and told me disdainfully, "They said that after you moved to the seaside, you specially decorated a children's room and replaced all the daily necessities in the house with parent-child sets. But I won't live with you, don't waste your thoughts." I said, calmly, and I heard him cheering on the other end of the phone, "Wow, Aunt Zhou gave me a new game console again, Aunt Zhou is the best." Then he hung up the phone in a hurry. Apparently, my departure did not have any impact on his life. Compared to being with me, his biological mother, he always liked those games more, and he also liked Vivian, who always took him to play games and gave him game consoles. But now, the indifference on his face suddenly broke, and the peach blossom eyes that looked very much like Jason were filled with tears in an instant. He clenched his teeth and stared at me stubbornly. This time, it was my turn to look at him coldly. Finally, he couldn't hold on any longer, and turned around and tried to run away before the tears fell, but he tripped and fell to the ground with a plop. He lay on the ground for a long time without getting up, just turned his head to look at me. He was always like this. Every time I got close to him, he would always put on an impatient face and speak coldly to me. Once my attention was slightly off him, he would deliberately fall down, or pretend to be uncomfortable, making me soft-hearted and helpless. But this time, I looked at him coldly and indifferently. He opened his eyes in disbelief, his face was mixed with confusion, puzzlement and sadness, and he cried in front of me with a "Wow, you are a liar, a big liar." You clearly said that you would love me forever and stay with me forever. Chapter 3. Jason frowned and accused me, Elena, although the child is young, he actually knows everything. You shouldn't be so indifferent to him. He looked serious and his attitude was as condescending as ever. He and I have always been like this before. We are not like a couple, but more like employees and superiors. He doesn't take the initiative to communicate with me at home most of the time. It's always me who takes the initiative to report every detail of life to him. As for my part, he is always indifferent. Only when it comes to Ethan, he will interfere or even scold me harshly in front of Ethan and the servants, without any mercy. So every time he shows a little displeasure, I will unconsciously reflect on myself, waste my energy, and repeatedly think about what I did wrong and what needs to be improved. Now, when I see his face again, I just feel extremely annoyed. Have you forgotten what you said to me when you divorced? He said that he hoped I would not disturb Ethan's life in the future. Ethan is still young and will soon get used to not having me as a mother. This is the best for him. That was the longest conversation he had ever said to me during the entire divorce process. Now he said as if it was a matter of course, I took it for granted at that time. Ethan is your only child. Mother and child are connected by heart. He needs you, and you also dash. I interrupted him, but I don't need him. Jason was stunned. Neither he nor Ethan had ever seen me being so rude. He seemed to still not understand my determination when I left a year ago. It was like he would never understand in his life that Ethan was not my only child. I once had a daughter, even if only I knew it. On the day of rebirth, I dreamed that Sophie was crying, and she also called me a liar. She said, "Mom, you promised me that you would live well after I left." Her crying made me so distressed that I promised her. I said that this time, Mom would definitely do it. I could only fulfill one of the promises to her and Ethan. Chapter 4. I used to love Ethan as much as I loved Sophie. He was the child I gave birth to after a lot of hard work, and he was the flesh and blood that fell from my body. I used to look forward to his arrival. When he couldn't speak, as long as he looked at me and smiled sweetly, I could forget all the difficulties and pains of being Mrs. Gu. At that time, I was willing to dedicate everything, even my life, to him, as long as he could grow up happily and healthily. Jason didn't love me. The story between him and me was very plain. We were childhood sweethearts who had known each other since childhood and had no suitable partners when we were old, so we were brought together by our elders. I used to feel uneasy because of this plainness. When I was a student, I saw with my own eyes what Jason looked like when he loved someone. Young Jason was much more energetic and cheerful than he is now. Every time I saw him, he seemed to be smiling nonchalantly when he was scolded, smiling with high spirits when he won the basketball game, and smiling with joy when he saw his beloved girl. When those peach blossom eyes smiled, they curved into a crescent, like the warm sun in winter, which made people's hearts surge and made people fall in love with them. At that time, he would send his beloved girl breakfast made by hand early in the morning regardless of the severe cold and heat, would fly sky lanterns for her, would fill the playground with flowers, and loudly express his love in front of everyone. Passionate and crazy. The girl was a top student, winning awards in various physics competitions along the way, and skipped grades to go abroad early to continue pursuing the true meaning of physics. After that, Jason seemed to become indifferent to everything. Before the wedding, I asked Jason, "Will we really be happy?" He answered me, "Yes." Love made me blindly ignore the indifference in his tone at that time. I comforted myself that people will always grow up and become calm, and the way he loves someone will also become calm. Until Vivian appeared beside him, a young and beautiful game planner. I realized that Jason only knew one way to love. He started to smile when replying to WeChat messages, noticed the lipstick colors that he never cared about before, researched women's perfumes, and stayed up late with her to test new games. When I went to the company anxiously because he didn't come home all night, he was eating breakfast with another woman, peeling eggs for her carefully, which was a treatment I had never enjoyed before. At that time, I thought, it doesn't matter if Jason doesn't love me, at least there is someone in this family who loves me, at least Ethan loves me. At that time, I didn't know that Ethan didn't love me as much as I thought, and this child would cut my heart one by one. Chapter 5. We parted on bad terms that day. With Jason and Ethan's tempers, I thought they would never come again. Unexpectedly, the next day, Ethan appeared downstairs of my house again with a small school bag on his back. This time he was alone. When the property contacted me, I was drawing. A little girl in a princess dress was running freely on the beautiful grassland of Ely. I don't have any photos of Sophie. I'm afraid that as time goes by, I will not be able to remember her appearance one day, so what I usually do most is to draw her in my memory one by one, from a baby to the last 5 years of her life. I drew a lot, filling every corner of my house. But then I thought, how can my Sophie only stay in the hospital bed, so I would travel every once in a while to take some beautiful pictures, and then draw her together with these beautiful scenery. This one, I drew a little slowly. When I was riding a horse in Xinjiang, I broke my right shoulder and it was a bit difficult to raise my hand, so this painting was not completed after a month of intermittent drawing. It was my first time riding a horse. When I chose the white horse, the young man in the horse team advised me hesitantly, saying that the horse had a bad temper and bullied strangers, and had thrown several people. I smiled and said it didn't matter because the white horse was really beautiful. As a result, when the team was halfway through, the white horse really got angry, suddenly knelt down on its front legs, and threw me to the grass. Everyone in the team was shocked. When her mother came to help me, a little girl worriedly used her little hands to help me gently pat the grass on my face, and asked me in a sweet voice, "Auntie, are you in pain?" I later took a lot of photos of her and her mother. She reminded me of Sophie, but in fact, the farthest place Sophie had been from home in her previous life was this seaside town. At that time, her health was slightly better, and I planned to go on vacation with my family. But Jason said he was busy, and Ethan said he had to participate in the test of Jason's company's new game, so in the end, only my mother and I came here. Those few short days were peaceful and beautiful. During the day, I taught her to draw in the house, and in the morning and evening, we went to the beach to pick up shells. She said that when she recovered from her illness, she would live in this place for the rest of her life. So when we divorced, I only asked for the Seaview house. This is a home for Sophie and me, and has nothing to do with Ethan or Jason. I didn't want Ethan to set foot in this house at all, and gave the property management the contact information of Jason and her parents without hesitation. Chapter 6. A few minutes later, the property management called again, saying that when he contacted Jason, Ethan ran into the community and disappeared. After all, I raised Ethan with great care, and there was no way I would let him get into trouble. I sighed, put down my paintbrush, and went downstairs to look for him. I searched the entire community, sweating profusely, and finally saw him waiting at my door, with a smug look on his face that said, "I knew you wouldn't ignore me." I didn't say anything, and when I opened the door, I let him run in, like a proud little lion, holding his head high and starting to patrol his territory. He asked me, "Which one is my room? You must have bought me a game console. I'm going to play games in my room." I didn't answer, and let him sit in the living room and wait for Jason to pick him up. I sat back in front of the easel and concentrated on finishing the painting. I had only painted a few strokes when I heard a loud noise from the children's room. I walked over quickly and saw the painting hanging on the wall at the head of the bed fell to the ground, the frame was broken into pieces, and the perfume liquid that was knocked over soaked Sophie's face beyond recognition. Ethan stepped on the bed and looked at me helplessly. I don't like this painting. Why did you hang someone else's portrait in my room? Why did you hug her in the painting? I knew he might just want to take the painting down, not breaking it on purpose. I also knew he was still a child and shouldn't lose his temper over something he didn't understand, but my tone was still a little stiff. "Didn't I ask you to wait for your dad in the living room? Don't touch things anymore." He noticed my restrained emotions and his expression showed a little fragility. "Before, when I broke something, you would always ask me if I was hurt." I didn't answer, my eyes fell on the bed sheet that he had stepped on, and I couldn't help frowning. "You get down first." He still stood on the bed without moving, staring at me. "Mom, who is this girl you drew? Why did you draw so many of her? Why is every painting in the house her?" He was too young to hide the panic and anxiety in his eyes. He saw the paintings that filled the house, and the girls in the paintings had eyebrows and eyes similar to his. "Mom, why do the security guard and the uncles and aunts who live here say that you don't have a son, but only a daughter?" I said I was your son, and they said I was a liar. I showed them our photos, but they didn't believe me. "This is my room, right?" He jumped off the bed and opened the closet as if to prove something, but was stunned when he saw the closet full of princess dresses. "Why did you buy so many dresses? Where are my clothes? Why are there no clothes for me?" He searched everywhere in the closet, and finally stared at me with wide eyes in vain, trying to find an answer from me that could comfort him. I looked at his eyes gradually filled with tears, and said nothing. His tears fell one by one in my silence, and suddenly he cried madly while pulling out the princess dresses in the closet one by one and throwing them on the bed, and swept all the dolls on the bay window to the ground, trying to declare his status unreasonably. "Why do you put other people's dresses in my closet? I don't like dolls. Why do you put so many dolls in my room? I don't like this bed and quilt, this is a bed for girls to sleep. I don't like pink, why do you make my room this color? Why do you hug other girls, why do you hang your paintings with others in my room? I don't like her. I hate her. Hate her." This time, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Ethan, get out. This is not your room, there is no room for you here." Chapter 7. When Jason came to pick him up, Ethan said to him in panic, "Dad, Mom is crazy. She told everyone that she only has one daughter." Chapter 8. When Jason and Ethan came again a month later, their attitudes became cautious. Jason said, "Elena, you are sick." He asked me to video chat with relatives and friends, and let them tell me that the daughter I drew, the daughter I told all the neighbors that I loved deeply, did not exist, but was just my imagination. They took out the family album and forced me to recall the past with them, but our past was too thin, just like this album that was not full. There were almost no photos of the family of three. Most of them recorded Ethan's growth, and some photos of me and him were mixed in. When he grew up, perhaps it was the nature of boys that made him move closer to those who had more authority in the family and could provide him with better conditions. He understood Jason's indifference and alienation towards me, and was not willing to take photos with me. Now, they are holding the album that has almost no photos of me, recounting every detail of the past, trying hard to convince me that I never had a daughter. I sneered, "Are you calling me crazy?" Jason shook his head, "No, Elena, you're just sick." He took out a surgical sheet, held my hand, and even choked up a little. "Elena, why didn't you tell me that we had another child?" I looked at him in silence. Guilt and regret appeared on his face. "As for Vivian, I can explain. It's not what you think." He said that he only paid more attention to Vivian because he valued her talent, and being nice to her was just a means to win over his subordinates. His tone was gentler than ever before. "Elena, I know that you impulsively aborted the child and divorced me because you misunderstood the relationship between me and Vivian. Afterwards, you regretted it and imagined that you had a daughter. Elena, it's my fault. I didn't know how to handle the situation well and didn't pay attention to the distance between me and my subordinates, which led to your misunderstanding and sadness, and caused you to become so seriously ill. In my previous life, we were married for 12 years, and I had never seen Jason talk to me in such a humble manner." I stared at him curiously, as if I was meeting this person for the first time. "You know, in my previous life, when I noticed that something was wrong between him and Vivian, he would only coldly ask me in response to every question and test I made, 'Elena, are you sick?' Even half a year ago, he called to ask me why, but he didn't answer my question in the end. Now, he thinks I am really sick, and suddenly he has a big mouth, explaining to me the relationship between him and Vivian for the first time. He said, 'Elena, you are sick and need treatment. Let me and Ethan accompany you and take care of you, okay?' I asked him to take Ethan with him." Chapter 9. When Jason and Ethan came the second time, they brought a psychiatrist. At that time, I had just returned from Mexico a few days ago. The doctor's surname was Lin. He took a look at my neck and said in a casual tone as if we were old friends who had known each other for a long time, "What's wrong with your neck?" I raised my hand and touched a thin purple mark on my neck, and answered casually, "I had an accident when I was paragliding in Cancun a few days ago. That was the last stop of the trip to Mexico. When I was paragliding over the sea and being towed by a motorboat, the rope connecting the motorboat suddenly broke. I was caught off guard and fell into the sea from a height of dozens of meters. Although I was wearing a life jacket, the rope of the paraglider strangled my neck and entangled me with the seat, so I couldn't float to the surface. I gradually lost strength due to lack of oxygen while struggling, and almost died in the sea. Fortunately, the guy driving the motorboat jumped into the water in time to rescue me. Looking back now, it still feels thrilling." Dr. Lin did not ask any more questions. He took a look at the painting on the easel with the paint still not dry. Sophie was sitting on the paraglider, looking at the blue sky and white clouds and smiling. He politely asked me if he could take a look at my other paintings. After I agreed, he carefully looked at all the paintings in my house, and then took one of them and asked me, "Can you tell me the creative idea of this painting?" It was a bird's eye view of the water surface. Sophie was floating on the water with her back facing up, smiling and opening her arms, as if welcoming and trying to embrace something. I drew this after I came back from bungee jumping on the Gandaki River in Nepal. There were many tourists who went bungee jumping that day. Some of them were nervous, while others were excited and asked their companions and staff for encouragement. Only I looked calm. The staff joked with me in English, saying that I didn't look like I was here to have fun, but rather to commit suicide, so he didn't dare to push me. He said this, but when he pushed me down, he showed no mercy at all. The wind squeezed my cheeks and eyeballs when I was falling rapidly. The momentary feeling of weightlessness made me feel as if I had returned to the end of my previous life, when I jumped from the 37th floor. In fact, my memory and senses at that time were very vague. Everything was over in the blink of an eye, but this time, the feeling of freedom of falling was so clear. When I was close to the water, I had hallucinations. I saw Sophie's figure looming in the water. She smiled and stretched out her arms to me, wanting to hug me, but when I tried to hug her tightly, it was broken into the ripples of the Gandaki River. I didn't answer Dr. Lin's question. Dr. Lin was very patient. He tried to analyze the logic behind my behavior. "Elena, when you aborted the child, it was just an embryo that had not developed gender characteristics. Why did you think it was a girl? Is it possible that you put yourself in it?" I laughed. "Are you calling me narcissistic?" Dr. Lin shook his head. "You are feeling sorry for yourself. Is it possible that you took out your resentment towards your husband on the child?" But you regretted having the child aborted, so you created a girl based on yourself. Similarly, it's not that you don't love Ethan, you love him too much, but you took your anger out on him, so you could only put all your love for him into this imaginary girl. But this little girl is too dangerous for you, he sighed softly. Wild riding, paragliding, bungee jumping. Elena, have you realized that the games you pursue are all high-risk games? This imaginary little girl is leading you to try death. If you don't open up and receive treatment, the consequences will be disastrous. Elena, I want to help you. Jason chimed in, Elena, get treatment, let us help you and take care of you, okay? Ethan also came forward and tried to hold my hand, his attitude was more obedient than ever before. I was wondering how could Mom suddenly stop loving me. It turns out it's because you're sick, let us help you. Mom, can you draw a picture for me too, you've never drawn for me before. I interrupted him, I have painted it for you. I gave you a portrait of you as a birthday present on your birthday last year. My grades were only above average when I was young, and I couldn't compare with the academic masters that Jason liked, but I was very talented in art and was admitted to the best art school in China. Unfortunately, my parents always felt that I couldn't make much money just by painting, and hoped that I would get married soon after graduating from the art school, so that they wouldn't have to worry about me and could immigrate to New Zealand with my brother without worry. I compromised. Because the person they were matchmaking was Jason. At that time, I thought that I could continue to paint after getting married, but I soon became pregnant with Ethan, and household chores and raising Ethan gradually occupied a lot of my time. Every time I wanted to calm down and paint a good picture, Ethan would suddenly start crying, and I could only put down the paintbrush to coax him, so I gradually abandoned it. Until Ethan's 5th birthday, I suddenly had the idea to pick up the paintbrush that I had been unfamiliar with for a long time and painted a portrait for him. But he obviously liked the game console Vivian gave him more, so he just threw it aside. Later, I saw the painting under the small desk in his room, folded into small squares to pad the table legs. Chapter 10. Ethan trembled in defense. I didn't mean to do that. I must have taken the wrong thing. I smiled and exposed him. No, you did it on purpose. Because that day, you dragged your feet and refused to take a shower, and I confiscated your game console, so you did this on purpose to retaliate against me. You have always been like this. Whenever I don't do what you want, you will hurt me by destroying the gifts I gave you and ruining my kindness. Because you know I love you and care about you, and I will be sad if you do this. You want to make me sad. You want to make me sad. Ethan's face turned slightly pale, and he stammered for a long time and couldn't speak. Chapter 11. I looked up at Jason. Actually, I had already seen his implicit intention to make peace. For example, in the previous life, Ethan's school had never organized a parent-child trip. For example, with so many bodyguards and nannies in the Gu family, how could they let Ethan run out alone without being in a hurry? For example, whether in the previous life or after rebirth, he actually hadn't worn the clothes I bought for him for a long time. From one day on, he, who never bothered about buying clothes, started to buy clothes for himself and go home. Later I found out that those clothes were all bought for him by Vivian. In order to make Vivian happy, he never touched the clothes I bought again, and even changed his perfume to the leather tone that Vivian liked. But he came to see me these few times, but he deliberately wore the clothes I bought for him and sprayed my favorite woody perfume. I just don't care. I don't care why he suddenly wants to make peace with me after a year, and I don't care why he didn't just bring Vivian into the house when I had already made room. Because I don't care, I don't say it out loud. It's just that he is used to being arrogant in front of me. Even if he asks for peace, he can't let go of his face. He only wants to use Ethan to make me soft-hearted and turn back. Now, he thinks I am sick, and it seems that he has suddenly found a step to bow to me. His attitude changes 180 degrees. In an instant, he has learned to be gentle and accommodating. It's as if because I am a patient, I have suddenly become a fragile thing that needs his protection. All his actions have a great and selfless reason for my good. He performed so sincerely that I almost believed it. Jason, you said that there is nothing between you and Vivian? Then why did you spend a lot of money to find the best jade, carve Buddha statues by hand, and walk up the 9,981 steps of Nanshan Temple with one kneeling step by step just because she is prone to illness, and ask the monk to consecrate it? Even when Sophie was so seriously ill in her previous life, he, as a father, had never done this for her. Why did you use the excuse of working overtime to accompany her on Valentine's Day? Why did you hug her and kiss her? Jason's face was also ugly. I smiled. Are you wondering why I know this so clearly? Your son told me. Chapter 12. The first time I heard about Vivian was from Ethan. Suddenly one day, he began to frequently tell me, how good is Aunt Jo? What did Aunt Jo do with Dad? Mom, why can't you be as good as Aunt Jo? He may have been unintentional at first, but later he was obviously intentional. I have said that he is precocious. After seeing that I would be sad every time I heard about Vivian, he would deliberately mention Vivian as long as I did something that made him unhappy. I know that he likes Vivian and those games, but he may not really want her to be his mother. He just enjoys revealing his father's intimacy with other women as a way to punish me and confront me. Especially after I had Sophie in my previous life, his behavior became more and more serious. During my pregnancy, he would say, intentionally or unintentionally, "Mom is fat and ugly, not like Auntie Jo who is thin and pretty." When I was breastfeeding, he would say casually, "Mom's belly is so loose and has so many wrinkles, her clothes are so shabby, all milk stains, and she smells like milk, so disgusting, no wonder Daddy has to sleep in a separate room from you." When I accompanied Sophie in the hospital for surgery, he would tell me from time to time that Jason gave Vivian this today and Jason accompanied Vivian to do that tomorrow. He would tell me happily that Vivian was so amazing and designed a new game, and he had a new game to play, unlike me who was useless. After returning from a business trip with Jason, he would tell me that he, Jason, and Vivian went to such and such places and played what, and others said they were a family of 3. He would show off to me the photos of the 3 of them taken together and ask me if they were good. He thought he was hiding it well, but every time he said these words, I could clearly see the malice in his eyes. For the first time, I experienced the naive viciousness of a child from my own son. He was like a devil, repeating spells in my ears every day that would drive me crazy. I knew that at that time, many bored relatives and friends would instigate him, saying that if I had a second child, I would only love Sophie and not him. I also asked myself if I was really partial to him and Sophie, which led to his erratic behavior. But I thought about it again, and I was very sure that I didn't. Even though I was running between the hospital and home for a long time for Sophie, I would ask Ethan about his well-being every day, carefully ask the nanny if he ate seriously, and help him check his homework. For his parent-teacher meeting, unless Sophie happened to have an operation, I would force myself to attend even if I stayed up in the hospital for 48 hours without closing my eyes. In fact, before Sophie was born, he didn't like my company. He always thought I was nagging, annoying, and did nothing every day, just revolving around him. He preferred to be alone in the room playing games. But when I stopped hanging around him and gave his sister the attention and time he didn't want, he got unhappy again. He can refuse it and not cherish it, but I can't give it to others. Chapter 13. I don't know who he resembles with this selfish bad character. It wasn't until I left Jason without hesitation after my rebirth, but Jason came to me again to ask for peace, that I was sure that he resembled his father. The man who was busy cheating on me and studying how to divorce me when I was exhausted by Sophie's illness and my heart was broken by Ethan's occasional intentional stimulation. Why didn't I want a divorce? I'm not a masochist, nor am I a love-brained person. I can't live without Jason, but for Sophie, I can't. The cost of Sophie's treatment is not affordable with ordinary income. But if I want to leave Sophie to Jason after the divorce, I'm worried about his attitude that he is more willing to spend time with Vivian than to go to the hospital to see Sophie. And Sophie's heart disease may not be able to withstand the stimulation of family changes. So I can only grit my teeth and hold on. Later I kept thinking, why can Jason love Ethan but not Sophie? Sophie was so beautiful and well-behaved. In the face of illness and countless surgeries, she always endured until she couldn't hold back her tears. Even though she was scared in the hospital with only the nurses, she always advised me to rest more. She missed her father and brother, and was confused about why they never came to see her, but she never asked and never said. At only a few years old, she was so sensible that it made people feel distressed. It was not until after Sophie died that I saw the long-prepared divorce agreement in his study, and I understood that because of her existence, he could not file for divorce with me. A man who filed for divorce from his wife when his daughter was struggling on the verge of death, how much public opinion storm would he and Vivian face? He couldn't afford to lose this man. He couldn't get rid of me, so he took his anger out on Sophie. Ethan saw his indifference to Sophie and followed suit. Even though Sophie liked him as a brother very much, he was unwilling to stay in the hospital for a while longer to accompany his poor sister. Even when I forced him to come, he would just sit there with his head down playing games. He would ignore Sophie when she talked to him. Even when I was not around, he would deliberately provoke Sophie just like he provokes me. Chapter 14. The day Sophie left was her 5th birthday. I called Jason and begged him to come home in the evening so that our family of 4 could celebrate Sophie's birthday. The birthday gift I prepared for Sophie was a painting, which I painted again after my rebirth and hung in the children's room, but was destroyed by Ethan. I held her and sat on the bay window, with the blue sea and windmills outside the window, and the golden sunlight fell on her face, covering up her sickly paleness. Sophie liked it very much and kept it by her side, looking at it from time to time. But Jason didn't come back until he was ready to light the candles on the cake. I saw the disappointment in Sophie's eyes. I hid in the kitchen and called Jason, but no one answered. When I returned to the living room, I was still thinking about how to explain to Sophie that her father was absent from her birthday party, when I heard 11-year-old Ethan looking at the painting with contempt and disdain, saying maliciously, It's so ugly, your face is as white as a ghost. In our school, girls as ugly as you will only be hated. No wonder your father doesn't want to spend your birthday with you. Sophie's face turned pale. I couldn't believe my ears. Could it be that Ethan always spoke to Sophie so harshly when I couldn't see? I had never hit Ethan since he grew up, but this time, I couldn't help but slap him. He covered his cheek, looked at me in shock, and shouted at me angrily, "Dad went on a date with Aunt Jo. He will not come back to spend the birthday with this sickly girl. No matter how many calls you make, it's useless. In the future, I will not spend her birthday with her anymore. Dad will divorce you and marry Aunt Jo. I will be with their family of 3. I don't want her sickly girl, nor you." Sophie fell down on the spot, covering her heart. That day, when I carried her soft body to the ambulance, I prayed desperately that God would be merciful again. But after the doctor rescued her, he still told me that Sophie's physical condition could not withstand another operation, and they advised me to give up. I looked at Sophie in pain on the hospital bed, my head was buzzing, and I was extremely confused for a while. I desperately called Jason, but he never answered. Later I knew that he was in Vivian's bed. In the end, I signed the consent form to give up treatment alone, watching the doctor pull out Sophie's oxygen tube and stop all the equipment. Jason was the last one to arrive at the hospital. Jason's parents, even the people from the funeral home, arrived, and he hurried over. He asked me why I didn't wait for him? Why did I give up treatment without authorization? I thought, what am I waiting for him for? Wait for him to get up from his lover's bed and come to Sophie's bedside to act like a loving father, so that others won't say that he wasn't even there when his daughter was dying? For his reputation, will my Sophie have to struggle for a few more hours? I looked at him, and then at Ethan, who was standing far outside the ward door. The expressions of the father and son were exactly the same in difference. One was busy having an affair when his biological daughter was struggling on the edge of death, and he didn't even spend her last birthday with her, and the other viciously provoked his own sister to death. Why can they still be so calm? Why don't they have a single tear? I suddenly felt that the father and son were so terrible. Chapter 15. I know that these are things from my past life, which have not happened in this life and will never happen again. Maybe I shouldn't judge 6-year-old Ethan for a crime that has never happened in this life, but I have no choice. I gently broke free from Ethan's hand and smiled at Dr. Lin. "Dr. Lin, you are wrong. The little girl in the painting is not dangerous to me, but Jason and Ethan are. If one day I go crazy and die, then it must be these two people who push me into madness and death." Chapter 16. When Jason and Ethan came for the third time, their attitude became tough again. At that time, I was preparing to leave for Iceland. Just as I was about to enter the elevator with my suitcase, I was stopped by Jason, who came out of another elevator. He threatened me, "Elena, if you still don't want to accept the treatment of a psychiatrist, I can only force you to be sent to a mental hospital." I looked at him with amusement. "What identity do you have to force me to be hospitalized? We are divorced, and you are not my guardian. There is nothing between us, ex-husband." Ethan interrupted, "Then I can do it, I am your son." I looked down at him. "It's a pity that you are not yet an adult. They can't do anything to me." I turned around and left, and Jason reached out to stop me again, but he broke the necklace on my neck. The necklace fell to the ground, and the cover of the pendant was broken, revealing the portrait of Sophie that I printed as a small photo. Jason stared at the small portrait and finally couldn't suppress his temper. "Since you decided to abort the child, you shouldn't regret it." I held the necklace pendant tightly with trembling hands, not letting myself show any weakness, and slapped him backhand. "He doesn't understand anything. He knows nothing." After rebirth, I hesitated and struggled. But at the end of the previous life, Sophie lay on the hospital bed in pain, crying and saying to me, "Mom, I feel so uncomfortable, I am in so much pain. If there is a next life, can I not come to the world? I really have no choice." I put the broken necklace in my pocket, no longer looked at Jason and Ethan, pulled the suitcase, and entered the elevator. Chapter 17. Iceland in winter has an extreme sense of desolation, with surging waves hitting the black sand beach, and the black sand and gravel formed by lava forming a sharp contrast with the white waves. Waterfalls, volcanoes, glaciers, fjords, a small island has many special landforms and wonderful landscapes. Because it is close to the Arctic Circle, the sunshine here in winter is very short, the sun is always near the horizon, the morning glow is almost seamlessly connected to the evening glow, and the pink and purple Venus belt in the sky can last for a long time. When I came, I brought a bunch of expensive photography equipment. After landing at Keflavik Airport, I rented a car and wanted to drive around the island to chase the aurora. However, either the aurora KP index was below 1 on sunny days, or the weather was bad and the clouds were too thick, so I couldn't take pictures. On the last day of the trip, the weather forecast said that there would be a blizzard in the evening of the next day, and the road might be closed for several days. I had to give up the rest of the trip. I was unwilling to give up after not photographing the aurora. Although the KP index of the aurora was still only 1 that day, I saw that the weather was still clear, so I decided to drive out at night to try my luck. I found an empty wasteland in the wild and waited in the car until 3 in the morning, but still got nothing. I finally became discouraged and decided to give up. But sometimes, the god of fate likes to play such a joke. I just started the car and prepared to leave when the aurora appeared. The green light band danced in the sky, flickering and changing, beautiful and mysterious. I quickly took the camera equipment and found a place with the widest view to record this gift from nature. The temperature was more than 10 degrees below zero. I stood outside and watched the aurora for a while, but I couldn't stand the cold, so I decided to go back to the car to take a nap and let the equipment shoot automatically. The necklace that Jason tore off was hung on the rearview mirror of the car by me, and Sophie on the pendant was smiling at me. I looked at her face and smiled. Sophie, look, your mom took you to chase the northern lights. Chapter 18. I lay in the car, watching the dancing aurora outside the window, and fell asleep after a long time, so that when I woke up, it was a little late, and it was already dawn. I don't know when a strong wind blew outside the car. The place where I set up the photographic equipment was a little far from the roadside where I parked. The flying snow dust made visibility so low that I couldn't see the place where the equipment was set up while sitting in the car. I calculated the time to drive back to Akureyri. Considering the blizzard that would come in the evening, I got out of the car and went to collect the equipment in the wind and snow. At that time, I didn't know that the blizzard time predicted by Iceland's weather forecast was not necessarily accurate, and it was common to delay it in advance. When I walked to the place where the equipment was set up, I found that both tripods were blown down, and one camera was blown away by the wind. I groped for a long time in the snow that was several times thicker than last night before I found the broken camera. I was afraid that the melting snow would damage the SD card, so I quickly put the SD cards of the two cameras into my pocket separately. When I packed up my equipment and walked back, the view was already white, with visibility less than 5 meters. The car key that came with the car I rented did not have a car search button, so I could only carry 2 heavy cameras and a tripod and walk to the direction of the car by feeling. I walked for a long time, far beyond the distance from the location where the equipment was set up to the car, and then I realized that I was lost in the blizzard that came early. I tried to identify the direction, and I was exhausted. In the end, I had to throw away the heavy camera and tripod, but I still couldn't find the car. I took out my mobile phone to call for help, but found that there was no signal. I could only search blindly in the howling blizzard alone. The raging storm became more and more violent, and the biting strong wind wrapped in snow particles blew me so hard that I couldn't open my eyes. I walked slower and slower, and I felt my body gradually losing temperature, and my limbs were stiff and cold to numb. I knew I couldn't stop, and I just moved forward instinctively. In the end, I still fell in the snow. I thought I was going to die in a snowstorm in a foreign country. But I was not afraid, I was even a little relieved. I said in my heart, I'm sorry, Sophie, I don't want to break my promise to you, but I really can't hold on any longer. In fact, Dr. Lin was right, I was indeed sick, and I had been testing death. Chapter 19. After Sophie died in my previous life, I suffered from severe depression. Or, I was already sick when I found out Jason was cheating, when Ethan kept provoking me, and when I accompanied Sophie in surgery and hospitalization. Every day I felt that the world was gray, and everything around me was full of malice. My husband and son were so indifferent, and my daughter was so pitiful. I tried hard and struggled, and I was exhausted every day, but I still couldn't see the way forward, and I couldn't see a ray of light. But for Sophie, I gritted my teeth and persisted, always whitewashing the piece, pretending to be nothing in front of her, so that she wouldn't find out the cracks in the family and the ugly faces of her father and brother. Until Sophie died, all the suppressed negative emotions suddenly broke out, swallowing me like an abyss. While I told myself not to die, I promised Sophie that even if she left, I would live well, and at the same time I couldn't control myself and hurt myself. At first, Jason and Ethan did feel guilty. They armed themselves with calmness, but they were not necessarily indifferent to Sophie's death. People are sometimes so contradictory. On the one hand, they try to escape their sins, and on the other hand, they can't help but feel guilty and want to make amends. They whitewashed the piece in front of me like I used to. Jason no longer saw Vivian, and Ethan no longer said those words that hurt me, pretending that we were a happy family of 3. But this didn't work for me at all. I always remember their cold eyes in front of Sophie's bed. No matter how much they smiled at me, no matter how gentle they were to me, in my eyes they were still so cold-blooded, so terrible, so hateful, and the most disgusting monsters in the world. The closer they got to me, the worse my condition became. I couldn't help crying in the middle of the night, I couldn't help losing my temper, and I couldn't help hurting myself. Soon, they began to lose patience, began to feel ashamed of me, and began to think I was a trouble. They began to relapse. Jason started not going home again. Ethan started to speak coldly again. The day I climbed up to the rooftop on the 37th floor, Ethan yelled at me with annoyance, "Sophie's death is entirely your fault, it has nothing to do with others. There is no genetic disease in our family. If you hadn't failed to give her a healthy body, she wouldn't have gotten sick and wouldn't have died. I stood on the edge of the rooftop, stunned. Really? It turned out to be my fault. There must be something I didn't pay attention to when I was pregnant, which caused Sophie to have a heart disease and come to this world to suffer. The thin line that had been pulling me not to step towards death broke at that moment. I jumped from the 37th floor. Chapter 20. Depression does not heal itself with rebirth. Even if I were to live another life, those negative emotions would still be there. On the day of the abortion, I even wished I could bleed all the blood on the operating table and leave with Sophie. But I dream about her, and she always cries and begs me not to die. I don't want to disappoint her. That day, I returned home and saw Jason and Ethan still living unscrupulously. They don't understand anything. They know nothing. Only I know everything about the past life, only I bear all the pain, only I remember their sins and their abominable appearance. So I ran away from those two monsters, Jason and Ethan. But it's not enough, those negative emotions are still there, the pain and guilt are still there. I didn't want to break my promise to Weiwei, so I could only hold on to her and rely on my longing for her to repeatedly remind myself to keep my promise to her to fight depression. So I decorated a nursery for her and pretended she was there with me. So I painted so many portraits of her that I almost went crazy. So I travel around and appreciate the world for her. I try to pretend that everything has changed and everything is getting better. I tried to pretend that I was letting go of the negative emotions. But I still can't help but test death again and again. Every time I played those high-risk projects, I lied to myself that this was what Sophie was looking forward to. But actually this is what I expected. Now, at last, my long-awaited death came. I felt calm in the white wind and snow. I slowly closed my eyes. Chapter 21. Beep, 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 a continuous car horn sounded in the snowstorm with zero visibility. The harsh sound penetrated the wind and snow and went straight into my ears. It refused to give up and made me irritated. I struggled with the dark and negative self in my heart for a long time amid the continuous car horns. I really wanted to give up. I really wanted to give up. But I thought of Sophie. Finally, I opened my eyes, struggled to get up from the snow, touched the tripod that I had thrown away before, and found that I had been spinning in the same place. I used the tripod as a crutch and used my limbs that were almost numb from the cold to crawl towards the direction of the car horn with all my strength. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. When I finally found the car, I realized that the car was not far away from me, at most 100 meters away. When I opened the car door trembling, how can I describe the magical scene I saw? No matter how many times I think about it later, I feel that it was Sophie's soul that saved me in the deadly snowstorm and guided me to find a way out. Because this could not happen. I don't know if the heavy tripod I put on the passenger seat tilted towards the driver's seat because of the blizzard shaking the car body. The necklace I hung on the rearview mirror somehow fell off and entangled the tripod on the steering wheel, just pressing the horn. Sophie on the pendant smiled at me amid the constant honking of the horn. At that moment, I burst into tears. Epilogue. After returning to the car that day, the phone signal was restored. I called the rescue number. Half an hour later, Icelandic rescuers arrived and sent me to the local hospital for examination. Fortunately, my frostbite was not serious, and I returned home after staying in the hospital for a few days. After experiencing that blizzard, my depression seemed to heal suddenly. I have always known that this seaside town is beautiful, but in the year I lived here, I have been living numbly and could not feel anything. Even if I travel everywhere, I can't see any beautiful scenery. But after returning from Iceland, I suddenly felt that everything here was different. The huge windmills in the distance were turning leisurely, the blue sea gently washed the golden beach, and the sunset on the rusty broken boat was so beautiful that people stopped. The world is no longer gray, and there are too many colors. I still live here, continue to paint, and still travel around, but I will no longer deliberately do something dangerous. I started to get in touch with new media, and posted my paintings of Sophie and some of my travel photography works on the internet, which attracted a lot of attention. I suddenly became a new painter and photographer with many fans. A year later, someone contacted me and wanted to help me organize an exhibition, and I agreed. The theme of the exhibition is, Angels Have Been Here. All the paintings on display are Sophie's portraits. On the opening day, there were unexpectedly many people, including Jason and Ethan. Although I didn't take it seriously, they were actually harassing me. After seeing that he couldn't force me to accept psychological treatment, Jason changed his strategy. Whether in the past life or this life, during our marriage, he never gave me flowers or any surprises, and now he actually wanted to use this to seduce me to remarry him. I sneered. As for Ethan, every time he saw me buying things for Sophie's home, he was extremely jealous. When I loved him in the past, he seemed to like those games more, but now no matter how many games Vivian gave him, he would just tell her to get out, and Jason also fired her. Now he seems to want my motherly love for him more than games. He cried and said to me, "Mom, I am your biological son, why don't you even look at me, but treat your imaginary daughter so well?" Until a week ago, they suddenly stopped. I thought they were finally tired, annoyed, and gave up. But now they are at my exhibition again. Seeing my alert face, Jason smiled bitterly. You don't have to be like this, we are not here to cause trouble. He stared at the nearest painting, Sophie in the snowstorm, smiling like an angel. Jason's eyes suddenly moistened slightly. Elena, I have been having the same dream for some time. I dreamed that we have a daughter named Sophie. Ethan also raised his red eyes and asked me, Mom, I dreamed of it too, is it true? I looked at them coldly and said nothing. That day, Jason and Ethan looked at every painting in the exhibition with red eyes. The last painting took up the entire wall. Under the gorgeous aurora of Iceland, Sophie grew white wings and flew into the sky. She is my angel, she has been here before. Jason and Ethan stayed in front of the painting for a long time, and never appeared in my life again. Extra, when Ethan was 11, Elena remarried and soon had a daughter named Sunny. On the day Sunny was born, Ethan climbed up to the rooftop on the 37th floor and asked to see Elena. Jason looked at him impatiently and said, Ethan, stop fooling around. At that moment, both father and son were stunned. They both thought of that dream in their previous life, when Elena was standing on the 37th floor, swaying in the wind, and they also said to her, stop fooling around. The blood splashing after Elena fell that day and Sophie's paleness when she died have been Jason's lingering nightmares for so many years. Elena's evaluation of him was right, he was just a slut. He always felt that Elena was too boring, too quiet, and too invisible. She repeated the same things at home every day, wearing similar clothes, and lived like a background board. It was not until after the divorce that Elena left without looking back that he realized his feelings for her. She was like a gentle rain that moistened everything silently, and she had infiltrated his entire life without him noticing. Once she suddenly left, it was as if a huge hole suddenly appeared in his heart that could not be filled. He would naturally call her name when he couldn't find anything. When he turned around, he would have the illusion that she was waiting behind him. One late night, after he lost his love for her in a daze, his longing for her suddenly invaded all his reason like a fierce virus. He wanted to find her back. At that time, he didn't understand anything. He knew nothing. He thought he had hidden the matter with Vivian very well, and he could pretend that nothing had happened. Elena loved him so much, and as long as he lowered his posture a little to show his kindness, she would definitely turn back without hesitation. He didn't know that Ethan had told Elena everything behind his back. He didn't know what he had done in his previous life. He didn't understand why Elena looked at him with cold and mocking eyes, as if he was a dirty thing, until he had that dream. In the dream, in the previous life, after Elena died, he also repented like now, and finally realized his feelings for Elena. Guilt, heartache, longing, and strong emotions almost drove him crazy. He knew he should do something. He had to do something. So, he took revenge on Vivian. He kicked her out of the company, forcing her to have nowhere to go, heavily in debt, and even to sell her body. Finally, she got a disease and came to him with a knife. When she stabbed the knife into his heart frantically, she roared, Did I force you to cheat? Did I force you to sleep with me? It's you are a slut, you can't control your lower body. Why do you blame everything on me? Yes, he is such a disgusting person, who likes to shirk responsibility and avoid the truth. Just like he knew that Sophie would have congenital heart disease, it is very likely that Elena discovered his cheating during pregnancy, and was stimulated, which led to Sophie's congenital deficiency. But he didn't want to admit it, so he ignored Elena's pain, ignored Sophie's pain, and used extramarital affairs to numb himself. Even on the day Sophie died, he didn't want to admit that he was wrong. He blamed Vivian, because she used her soft body to hold him back, and because she quietly set his phone to silent mode, so he missed Elena's call and Sophie's last birthday. He blamed Elena, because she signed the consent form for giving up treatment without authorization, and because she ended Sophie's life in advance, so that he could not see her for the last time. It was all their fault. He was not wrong. He had been telling himself this twisted truth. So Elena was right, he was really a terrible monster, with an abominable face and no remorse. He deserved that he could not redeem Elena's love, he was not worthy of her love. He never dared to see her again. He didn't really want to give up Elena, he actually wanted to continue to pester her. But he was afraid of her cold eyes, which reflected all his darkness and made all his filthiness invisible. So over the years, he had been controlling himself and Ethan, not letting himself or Ethan disturb Elena. In fact, he also blamed Ethan, blaming Ethan in his previous life for stimulating Sophie to death and for forcing Elena to death in the end, even though he had not guided Ethan correctly at the time and had not stopped Ethan's bad behavior. But he could deceive himself into thinking that he was not wrong, and everything was the fault of Ethan, an 11-year-old child. In his previous life, after Elena died, Ethan himself also suffered from severe depression. Elena said that Ethan's bad habits were very similar to his, which was absolutely true. Just like he didn't know how to repent until Elena died, Ethan didn't know how much he loved his mother who had been mentally abused by him until Elena died. Ethan began to cry suddenly for no reason, lose his temper for inexplicable reasons, and self-harm if he was not watched. Jason watched all this coldly and didn't want to care about him. In his previous life, Jason didn't know what happened to Ethan after his death. However, after having the same dream about his previous life as him in this life, Ethan suffered from the same severe depression as in his previous life. He always cried and wanted to see Elena. He always covered his heart and asked Jason, "Dad, my heart hurts so much. Do I have a heart disease like my sister? If I also have a heart disease, can my mother and sister forgive me?" But every time he went to the hospital for a checkup, the results were all normal. When he was older and understood what psychological effects were, he never asked Jason this question again. But he still wanted to see Elena. Because Jason was watching him, he could only spy on Elena's life through the internet and other people. After finding out that Elena had a new boyfriend, he began to stimulate Jason as he did to Elena. He would deliberately tell Jason where Elena went with that man again, that Elena received a gift from that man again, that Elena kissed that man, and that Elena accepted that man's proposal. Elena is getting married. He never tired of repeating to Jason how happy Elena was after leaving them. He punished himself and tortured Jason. Jason finally understood how Elena felt when she faced Ethan, and finally understood why Elena was so determined not to have this son. He was a hideous demon like him. Jason almost went crazy when he knew that Elena was going to get married. He wanted to rush to her and grab her and ask, "How can you get married? How can you fall in love with someone else? Have you forgotten Sophie?" But he restrained himself. Even if he was not invited, he also sent a decent gift. When he knew that she was pregnant and gave birth to another daughter, Jason was heartbroken, but he was no longer so excited. Instead, Ethan made a big fuss. But that day on the rooftop on the 37th floor, when both father and son were stunned by the 3 words, "Don't mess around," that he blurted out, Ethan came down from the rooftop by himself and never mentioned wanting to see Elena again. They looked through Elena's Weibo together, and a fan asked her why she named her daughter Sunny instead of Sophie after drawing so many Sophie. She replied, "Sophie is Sophie, Sunny is Sunny." Others may not understand, but Jason and Ethan understand that Sunny is not a substitute for Sophie, and is not used to fill the vacancy of Sophie. Elena is a good mother, and she never favors any of her children. Later, Jason invested half of his property in charity and established a charity foundation for children's cardiovascular disease. As Ethan grew older, he always recalled the bad self in the dream about his previous life. In fact, although he likes games and likes Vivian who can design games, he never thought of making Vivian his mother. At first, he just wanted to use this method to resist Elena's control over him. Later, he just hated that most of Elena's energy was occupied by Sophie. He was afraid that Elena would really stop loving him after having a sister, as those people said. In his previous life, when he was 11 years old, he might not know that those behaviors that deliberately provoked Elena and Sophie were wrong, and he didn't want them to die. But once bad words become a habit, they will always come out of your mouth. So he became very silent. After entering university, he did not choose finance, but chose to study medicine, majoring in pediatric cardiovascular disease clinical specialty, and would go to the children's hospital to volunteer during holidays. He and Jason are trying to atone for their sins in their own way. Many years later, Ethan finally became a qualified pediatric heart surgeon. He spent almost every day in the hospital, either treating patients or performing surgery on them. He desperately overdrawn himself, as if only by curing more children could he wash away the sins in his heart. Later, he met a 5-year-old girl, who was very beautiful and well-behaved. She suffered from the same congenital heart disease as Sophie, and Ethan was her surgeon. The day of the operation was the little girl's birthday. The operation lasted 20 hours and was successful. Ethan walked out of the operating room exhausted with a smile, and then fell down. The heart stopped suddenly, and he left with a smile. The end of the story.